This week on Sword and Scale Rewind.
The idea of naming your kids like you would name your pets with like rhyming names. Who does this benefit?
Look, Jazz is not that bad, but then when you got to name the other one and you go with Taz, that's...
Yeah.
They should have murdered their mom just for the names.
I kind of agree with that.
God.
We should make bleach that doesn't discolor things.
There you go.
How about that? Bleach for murderers.
I was going to say, that's a great product.
Yeah.
If you're going to get into products, Mike, murder bleach.
Sell it at the Sword and Scale store.
Yeah.
Just swallow some Tide Pods and get it over with.
Yeah.
Murder bleach. Get the death out.
Please subscribe to Sword and Scale Rewind and visit ssrewind.com.
Sword and Scale contains adult themes and violence and is not intended for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
We are looking now aggressively for someone who is a killer in our community. Now, some are saying, well, Sheriff, you're scaring our community. I hope I am.
Hey, right on cue. This is Season 8, Episode 192 of Sword and Scale, a show that reveals that the worst monsters are real. Okay, I'm going to remind you one more time about our new sticker perk. It's available right now through the month of August, through the end of the month of August. So make sure you're a Plus member before then at the $10 level or higher to get it. SwordandScale.com/plus. Love is, well, where do I start? We all need it in some form or another. And many of us, if we haven't already, hope one day that we're going to find that special someone, a life partner, a soulmate. But true love is like a missing piece of a puzzle. It only seems to reveal itself when we aren't searching for it. This is why the act of finding love is so aptly named falling in love. You can't find it. In almost every case, love finds you. Despite this somewhat common knowledge, millions of people continue to search every day, hoping to find that perfect mate. It explains the surge of dating apps and the annoying commercials that go with them. Look, there's definitely nothing wrong with putting yourself out there and being optimistic, hoping to improve your chances of finding love. But some people grow tired of waiting. So tired, in fact, that they become desperate. And that's when problems start happening. After all, you can never underestimate a truly desperate person. There's really no telling how far they might go and what they might do to get what they want.
Sheriff 911, where's the emergency?
Hey, we got an ambulance en route. She said her mom called her and said her sister was hurt at the house. Her vehicle's missing.
Okay, do you know how she, or what happened to her?
I don't know. My mom just said call immediately, and I don't know what's going on.
Okay, so she's been hurt and her vehicle is also missing?
Yes.
On the morning of February 6th, 2017, 28-year-old Kayla Crocker of Pensacola, Florida, was expected at her mother's house. The typical arrangement for Kayla was that her mom would babysit Kayla's 2-year-old son while Kayla was at work. But on this morning, Kayla did not show up. And as most mothers would, Kayla's mom became concerned.
Was she supposed to drop her child off?
She was supposed to drop him off at 5:30.
5:30 a.m.? Okay. Did Kayla ever show up to drop her child off?
No.
Did you go over to her house?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And when you got to Kayla's home, what did you notice, if anything?
There was a jewelry box laying in the driveway that she had gotten for Christmas from my oldest daughter.
Do you remember if her car was there?
The car was not there.
When Kayla's mother arrived at her daughter's home, she found Kayla's car was gone, and some of Kayla's belongings had been thrown about her driveway. With a gut-wrenching feeling that something was very wrong, Kayla's mom cautiously approached her daughter's front door.
I unlocked the front door to the porch. When I got into the trailer, it felt warmer than what Kayla usually has her place. I thought that was kind of odd. When I went to go through the kitchen, I noticed the nursery door closed. So I walked over and I pushed it open. I see her in there. But she wasn't laying, she was sitting. She was sitting leaning up against the dresser with her legs under the crib. She was facing the crib. She had blood that was dried and running down the side of her face. And her hands were tied with a shoelace real tight. Her hands were purple. And then there was white rope wrapped around that, tying it to the back of her, but having it firm against her waist.
Kayla's mother found Kayla in the nursery of the home. Dried blood caked the side of Kayla's head and face, and she was bound by shoelaces that had been tied so tightly, Kayla's hands had turned purple.
I called my daughter, told her to call 911, get the ambulance there immediately, because her breathing, it was like a mechanical, it was horrible, but she was still breathing. And my phone was about ready to die, so I asked her to call, and I went into the kitchen looking for scissors, but I found a knife instead. I couldn't find the scissors. So I cut the shoelaces off of her, and I leaned her forward, and I seen it was a half bow, so I pulled the one, and it came apart, and then she fell over.
Kayla's mother cut the bounds that had been cutting off her daughter's circulation, and although Kayla was unresponsive and her breathing was faint, she was still alive. In what must have felt like an eternity, Kayla's mother waited for help to arrive. And when it finally did, EMTs rushed Kayla to a nearby hospital. Meanwhile, Kayla's house was taped off as a crime scene, and detectives went to work on trying to make sense of what had just happened. What they quickly realized is that Kayla's home had been ransacked, and many of her belongings had been stolen, including her car.
We're looking for a 2006 white Chevy Cobalt. Our victim's named Kayla Crocker. She is currently in one of the local hospitals. She did sustain a gunshot wound. I want to assure the public that we called in all of our available resources. We have the Florida Department of Law Enforcement engaged, U.S. Marshals are engaged, of course ourselves, Santa Rosa, any law enforcement agency in our area, and of course out of state with Baldwin County and the appropriate police departments and Alabama Highway Patrol.
In an effort to capture the person or persons responsible for the robbery and attack on Kayla Crocker, the county police called in several other law enforcement agencies to assist, including the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, U.S. Marshals, and even out-of-state Highway Patrol. With respect to Kayla, a home invasion, grand theft auto, and even an attempted murder doesn't typically elicit such a heavy-handed response from police. The reason that the county police called in the big guns for this particular crime scene is because they had very quickly inferred who was responsible. You see, Kayla Crocker was not a lone victim. In fact, there were several others, all of whom had unwillingly become part of someone's murder spree. A murder spree that began 1 week earlier inside a Milton, Florida hotel room.
Sheriff's Office, this is the 911 center. What's going on? I had a desk call me and tell me that they thought they heard multiple gunshots. So I grabbed my key and I went down there and I knocked 3 different times like I was supposed to. And all I did was put the key in the door, open the door, and I seen her laying halfway in the bathroom, him laying in the bed, and everything's covered in blood.
How many gunshots did you hear?
They said like 5 to 7. Are they dead? I don't know, ma'am. I didn't walk in.
On January 31st, 1 week before the attack on Kayla Crocker, the sheriff's office in Milton, Florida received a call from a desk clerk at the Emerald Sands Inn Hotel, reporting that she had found 2 bodies covered in blood inside one of the hotel rooms. When police arrived, they quickly identified the 2 victims as 30-year-old Alicia Greer and 39-year-old Jacqueline Moore. Both women had been shot to death, and shortly after the bodies were identified, a witness came forward. It turns out that while these 2 women were being gunned down, there was a 3rd woman inside the hotel room.
Alicia was trying to get away from Billy and take some time to clear her head because they had been arguing. We were going there so she could get away from Billy, and Jackie and I were kind of like her support system.
Okay.
And not long after we were at the hotel, she ended up telling Billy where she was at, which defeated the purpose.
How well did you know Billy? Did you just kind of know him through Alicia?
Yeah, I only knew him through Alicia.
Okay.
I knew that he was a very violent person.
Alicia Ann Greer was the mother of 3 children, and prior to being gunned down in a hotel room, she worked as a memory care specialist at an assisted living facility in Pensacola, Florida. To the people that knew her, Alicia was considered something of a goofball and was known for her caring, energetic, and happy-go-lucky personality. But not long after Alicia's 30th birthday, she began dating a 44-year-old named William Billy Boyett.
Alicia Greer started dating William Boyett around Thanksgiving of this past year. The relationship quickly turned sour. Alicia Greer was beaten so bad by Boyett, she ended up in the hospital just 10 days before she was killed.
He choked her down to the ground, kicked her in the face, hit her so hard in the head with a 2-liter bottle of soda that was unopened, she had to have stitches in the top of her head.
After learning the hard way that Billy Boyett was an abusive boyfriend, Alicia decided to end their relationship. And Billy wasn't overly thrilled with that decision. Fearing that Billy might hurt her again, Alicia decided to hide out at a hotel with 2 of her girlfriends and hoped that Billy would eventually cool down. But on that very day that Alicia checked into her hotel, Billy called Alicia on her cell phone, and she made a horrible mistake. He convinced her to tell him where she was staying, and she did.
When Billy got to the room, you were not in the bathroom yet, right? You were still in the main motel room?
Yes.
Was anybody with him?
No. They were arguing whenever I did go in the bathroom and I was going to get a shower. I don't know if it got physical, if he hit her, if she hit him. I don't know what happened once I went in the bathroom, but I could hear them talking. I turned the shower on and got a shower and I heard the gunshots.
All right. And then before when you came out of the bathroom, you just got out of there, you ran and...
Yep, I ran to I think it's Miles Furniture.
Okay.
When Billy arrived at Alicia's hotel, he immediately began arguing with her in front of her girlfriends, one of whom decided to remove herself from the situation and went into the bathroom to take a shower, a decision that would undoubtedly save her life. Unfortunately, Alicia's other friend, Jacqueline Moore, wasn't as lucky. Billy fled the hotel, and Alicia's surviving friend eventually opened the bathroom door to find a horrific and bloody scene. Her 2 friends, Jacqueline Moore and Alicia Green, had been shot to death. After police spoke to the bathroom witness, they began searching for Billy while also digging into his past. To no one's surprise, it turned out that Billy Boyett had a lengthy criminal history.
We know William Boyett Jr. is a dangerous man, and looking at his past offenses confirms it. Charges listed included aggravated assault, battery, 2 counts of aggravated battery, false imprisonment, and obstructing justice.
Billy Boyett had been in and out of prison his whole life, and for police it was obvious that this very dangerous man needed to be found and caged again. But after Billy fled from Alicia's hotel, no one seemed to know where he had gone. And no one could have guessed what he would do next.
And I don't know, I'd been asleep for a while. I'm not real sure what time it was, but it was still nighttime. And he come to banging on the door, and he came in, and he had blood on the side of his head, and he had a gun, and he held it at me, and he told me to grab some things, and then he leave. And I was like, why? Why do I have to leave? And he was like, now.
After murdering his ex-girlfriend and her friend, Billy Boyett drove to the nearby home of a young mother, 37-year-old Mary Rice. And according to her, on the night that Billy killed Alicia, Mary awoke to the sound of someone banging on her front door. The crazed and bloody Billy Boyett entered her home with a handgun and demanded that she get into his car.
He kept telling me he was going to kill my kids, so all he had to do was make a phone call. He was going to kill me if I didn't do what he said. Lana was dead then. He strangled me down there. He beat me.
Take a deep breath, Mary. You're all right now. Just take a deep breath.
He's a monster.
Mary Rice followed Billy's instructions. She got into the car and the two of them drove into the night. Mary was eventually reported missing by her family, and police quickly put two and two together. Billy Boyett was on the run and had likely taken Mary Rice as his hostage. And as police were unable to locate him, they had little choice but to warn the public.
Deputies are looking for William Boyett Jr., a person of interest in the case. He's considered armed and dangerous. Investigators say he lives in Escambia County. He's about 5'10" and weighs 220 pounds.
Do not, I repeat, do not attempt to contact or engage with Mr. Boyett. This gentleman has gone far and above, what we normally deem as incorrigible. This gentleman is a killer.
The word was out. A killer was on the loose. But unfortunately, alerting the public about Billy Boyett wouldn't be enough to keep everyone safe, as Billy's reign of terror and what would ultimately become his week-long crime and murder spree was only just beginning.
This past year has shown us that without your health, you have nothing. If you're not well, you can't work, look after yourself, or take care of your family. You can't enjoy the life you've worked so hard to build. That's why you need to prioritize taking care of your long-term health today, before it goes from good to bad to worse. So invest in your long-term health with Forward. Forward is intelligent medicine with a personal touch. Their doctors are dedicated to catching top killers like cancer and heart disease early before it's too late. And catching them early could save you tens of thousands of dollars in the long run. Everyone's health history is different, which is why Forward doctors personalize a health plan with you, based on your genetics, lifestyle, and biometrics to achieve long-term results and ensure nothing gets missed. It's time to invest in a doctor that's invested in you. Go to GoForward.com today to protect your future health. That's GoForward.com. GoForward.com.
On January 31st, 2017, 44-year-old William Billy Boyett gunned down his ex-girlfriend Alicia Greer and her friend Jacqueline Moore at a Milton, Florida hotel. A few days later, a young mother, 37-year-old Mary Rice, was reported missing by her family, and police surmised that Mary had been kidnapped by Billy. After this kidnapping, Billy drove south towards Baldwin County, Alabama, with Mary in tow. And along the way, he made several stops and purchased a variety of supplies.
They came to my register. Both of them came to my register.
How did she appear to you?
Scared. I asked how they were doing, and he said to me, I just killed my girlfriend.
Okay. What was your response to that?
I thought he was joking.
Okay.
While shopping at a small variety store, Billy brazenly told the cashier that he had killed his girlfriend and then purchased some outdoor survival and camping gear. Billy was seemingly planning to spend a few days and nights in the woods, but his other purchases indicated he was also planning something else.
Well, let's go stay with Walmart. What did you get at Walmart?
Ammunition.
You said you went to someplace else in Crestview?
Yes.
Where else did you go in Crestview?
There's another little ammunition place.
What did you buy in that store?
And more ammunition. He just had this like wild animal look to him. It was, I've never seen anything like it before in my life. It got worse as time progressed.
In addition to buying camping gear, Billy also made several stops to buy bullets. He was apparently stockpiling ammunition, and reportedly Mary Rice was getting a bad feeling that Billy was planning to hunt humans. Then, 3 days after the murders of Alicia Greer and Jacqueline Moore, tragedy struck again.
This morning around 8 a.m., the Baldwin County Sheriff's Office received a call of a deceased female lying in the yard. Deputies have responded to the scene. At this time, we believe we're working a homicide.
And she was found in the yard?
Yes.
Who was she found by?
By a family member.
Okay.
On an otherwise quiet Friday morning, about 40 miles south from the hotel where Alicia Greer and Jacqueline Moore lost their lives, in a small neighborhood of Lillian, Alabama, 52-year-old Peggy Brose was found dead in her front yard. She had been shot once, point blank in the head.
Miss Brose was a church member of ours, been a church member here for years, was always there when she was needed, even if she had just worked the night before. She was a respiratory therapist at Baptist Hospital for some 20 some odd years. She's got a husband and 2 grown children. They're holding up the best you can right now in this circumstance.
Peggy Brose was a wife, a mother of 2 children, and a beloved member of her community. After finishing an overworked shift at First Baptist Hospital, Peggy drove home, and when she stepped out of her car, Billy Boyett skulked up her driveway and shot her in the head. The murder of this sweet old lady was seemingly committed for no other reason than to steal her car, a 2003 white Chrysler Concorde.
We believe the Concorde has a dent or scratch on the right front quarter panel. If anyone sees this vehicle, though, call 911.
Other than the vehicle that y'all are looking for, any other personal effects missing that you know of at this point? Purse or any other personal effects?
There's nothing else that we're looking for right now. The big thing is the vehicle. If people spot that vehicle, we urge that they call 911.
As news spread of Peggy Brose's murder and authorities in Alabama were contacted by police in Milton, Florida, there was little doubt as to who was responsible. But why would Billy Boyett murder a random elderly woman? If all he wanted was her car, he could have simply pushed her down and stolen her keys.
We're dealing with an extreme situation here. Let me tell you just how extreme. We've received information from more than one source on Mr. Boyett. He is a member and has been a member for a long time of the drug culture. He's known to be a heavy user of spice. These people stay awake for 4, 5, 6 days at a time.
Billy's breakup with Alicia Greer was likely the catalyst of his murderous behavior, and police believed that his continuous rampage was being fueled by an addiction to the drug spice. If you're not familiar with spice, pat yourself on the back. That's a good thing. People love to blame murders on this drug, perhaps in some cases for good reason. In addition to being considerably dangerous, spice is also a fairly complex drug. In fact, it's not a single drug at all, but a wide variety of laboratory-made chemicals designed to mimic the effects of marijuana. Except, it doesn't really do a good job of that. The effects can be disastrous. In short, the behavior of someone that's on spice is impossible to predict. And Billy Boyett was known to be a heavy user of this drug. There was no telling where he would go or what he would do next. Still, police continued to search, and they began interviewing people that knew Billy, starting with his mother.
Do you think Billy's going to reach out to you at some point?
I'm the only person he's ever really had.
And if he did, I certainly would let you know, because, he needs to.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm afraid he's going to kill himself,
Well,
and he might hurt somebody else.
Any idea where he would go?
I have no idea whatsoever.
Is there any other females that you know that he was involved with?
Oh, yes, he was involved before Alicia with the Bethany Lutz.
Prior to his relationship with Alicia Greer, Billy had dated a different Florida woman, 25-year-old Bethany Lutz. And not surprisingly, his relationship with Bethany didn't last too long.
How long were you guys together as a couple?
Just a couple of months.
Okay. You did mention that that Billy was violent with you at some point in your relationship, right?
Yes, sir. The first couple of weeks were sweet, and then it went to a nightmare.
Okay. So he was violent on multiple occasions?
Yes.
Okay. And during that time, have you ever met or heard of Mary Rice?
I had seen messages on his Facebook from him and her. She was talking about wanting to be with Billy and sending pictures of her and her family and talking about herself and this and that.
Did it strike you that she was just like friends with him, or was she trying to date him? She was flirtatious?
Yes.
As police were digging into Billy's life and questioning the people that knew him, they quickly learned something very interesting. Mary Rice was not a random victim. She knew Billy and had met him months earlier while Billy was in prison.
I had taken Mary to visit him, visitation sometime last year, towards the end of the year.
To your knowledge, was that the first time they had met in person?
Yes.
Was that visit at the jail?
Yes.
And did you go inside with him while they were?
Yes.
Do you remember what the conversation was about or what they talked about?
He had nowhere to go when he got out. I believe he was a month, maybe 2 months away from getting out. He had nowhere to stay or to go, and she had offered him to come stay with her.
I'm going to say this right now. I've been doing this for a long time. There are a lot of ladies that listen to this show. And some of you get a little, obsessive with true crime. There's a line you probably shouldn't cross. A line that Mary Rice decided to cross. During Billy's most recent stint behind bars, he and Mary Rice had become pen pals. A short time later, Mary went to visit Billy in prison and offered to let him live with her upon his release. Now, I know that a lot of women like the bad boy, but inviting a violent ex-con to live in your home isn't something you should ever think about doing. But apparently for Mary Rice, this was common practice.
The two started writing to each other in 2016 while Billy Boyett was in jail, and that's not unusual for her. She wrote to a lot of inmates and then even went so far as to let them stay in her house, upon their release to kind of get back on their feet.
Needless to say, Mary Rice was kind of an odd duck. And although she was a mother, Mary was mostly estranged from her children. I wonder why. She lived alone and spent her free time writing to male inmates before inviting them to stay at her home when they got released from prison. As for Billy Boyett, the exact nature of Mary's relationship with him wasn't widely known.
Mary and Billy, were they dating at the time? Or just friends?
I don't know. I think they were dating, but they could have been friends. It wasn't really set in stone.
I gotcha.
I mean, she said she liked him. They've been talking, but she didn't tell me they were together.
Having learned that Mary Rice was friends with Billy and more likely romantically involved with him, police began to wonder, was Mary a victim of kidnapping? Or had she left with Billy willingly? Was she a hostage or an accomplice? Then 5 days after Mary was supposedly kidnapped, police got what they felt was the answer to these questions. And that answer came from an unlikely source, a local deer hunter.
Did you monitor your game cameras on a regular basis back then?
Yes, ma'am, 2 or 3 times a week.
Now, did there come a time when your cameras actually caught some people instead of some animals?
Yes, ma'am. When I checked my camera, brought it back, plugged it in, checked it, I seen 2 individuals walking through my corn pile.
If you're not up to date on the latest technological achievements in deer hunting, many hunters now use what they call game cameras to monitor and track animals. These motion-activated cameras are typically attached to trees in heavily wooded areas, and in order to bait deer to them, hunters will often leave a pile of grain or corn nearby. When this particular deer hunter went to review his game camera footage, he didn't see any deer. Instead, he saw Billy Boyett and Mary Rice walking through one of his corn piles. And Mary Rice, a supposed kidnap victim, didn't appear to be walking with Billy against her will. She was quite clearly walking beside him, as if nothing was wrong. As other sightings of Billy Boyett and Mary Rice started to funnel in, police also began collecting surveillance footage of Mary shopping in convenience and department stores while having ample opportunity to escape from Billy. One such instance even showed Mary shopping in a Walmart by herself before returning to a parking lot where Billy picked her up.
Regarding Mary Rice, what evidence made you guys make that jump to a suspect?
Because of photographic information that we have from convenience stores, from a shot taken in a wooded area, where there was sufficient time for her, if you will, to make an escape, to walk away, to seek refuge, if you will, and safety. But she has returned, continually to him. So at this point in time, we upgraded her status, if you will, and she would be treated as a suspect with any contact with law enforcement.
Authorities officially changed Mary Rice's status from hostage to suspect, but this didn't make any sense to the people that knew Mary. Mary had never been in trouble with the law and was certainly not perceived as a violent person. For her family, the idea that Mary could be helping Billy Boyett or was somehow involved in murder was not only improbable, it was unimaginable.
Now, I talked to Mary Rice's brother. He said their family is just beside themselves for any information because at this point, they don't know if she's dead or alive, a hostage, or an accomplice.
It's been heart-wrenching to find out that she's even involved in all this stuff. This meaningless, senseless killing and rampaging, no, it's nothing like her. We just want to see her home safe and find out the truth of what's going on.
Although her friends and family doubted that Mary was Billy Boyett's accomplice, the surveillance footage of the two of them together was problematic. There were clearly several opportunities where Mary could have escaped or asked someone for help. Still, according to one of Mary's friends, there was a possible explanation for this.
I just can't believe this. I mean, Mary is a good person. I don't care. I mean, I just can't. And I could see him being manipulating. I can see his demeanor is very scary-some. I think that all those things that in the Walmart thing, the videotape and all that stuff, there's so many things that could be. I mean, he could have said, you got 10 minutes. He could have put a little camera on her and said one wrong word or one note. And I will go after your kids. I will leave you here. Because he knew where his family lived. So why couldn't he manipulate her?
For Mary's friend, it was conceivable that Billy Boyett had threatened to hurt Mary's children if she stepped out of line. Perhaps Mary was in so much fear and so concerned for her children's lives that she dared not do anything to upset her captor. On the other hand, Billy's ex-girlfriend, who knew Billy quite well, had her suspicions about Mary Rice. Women always have that intuition, don't they?
And so he had said they had her on camera walking or going across the street to get food for them or something somewhere. Now, I know Billy. Billy's very controlling. If he is holding somebody hostage, Billy's not going to be stupid. Billy is either going to be at her back with a gun, or he's going to be holding on to her by the back of the neck, or have control of her somehow so that if she tries to bolt, Billy has the situation under control. He's not young by any means.
Just your gut feeling is you don't think Mary was being held hostage?
In my heart, I don't believe that she was being held hostage.
As the people that knew Mary Rice and Billy Boyett speculated on whether or not the two of them were working together, or if Mary was an unwilling hostage, police continued their search to find them and focused their efforts on locating the car that Billy had stolen after murdering its owner, Peggy Brose.
Sheriff 911, where's your emergency?
It's right off the I-10 interstate on 90.
I found the car that's linked to the Lillian murder.
So is it parked?
Yes, it's off the side of the road, and it's behind some trees that have been cut, and there's a couple tractors on the side of the road.
So is there anybody in it, or is it just abandoned?
I don't know. The trees are covering the whole car except for the back.
2 days after the murder of Peggy Brose, her car was found in a wooded area of Escambia County, Florida. It was abandoned, covered in tree branches, and Billy Boyett and Mary Rice were nowhere to be found. As police inspected the car, they found why Billy had likely abandoned it. Peggy's car had a flat tire. Billy was now on foot and likely in search of another vehicle. Police knew it was no longer a question if he would kill again, but when, and they were desperate to find him.
We are looking now aggressively for someone who is a killer in our community. There is currently a capital murder warrant out in Alabama for Mr. Boyett, but we want this image everywhere. Now, some are saying, well, Sheriff, you're scaring our community. I hope I am. I want everyone that has a Facebook page, I want all of our media, everyone to assist us in the location and eventual capture of Mr. Boyett. We have reason to believe that he's been involved in 3 homicides to date. You know, for God's sake, let's don't make it 4.
Unfortunately, there would be a 4th victim. If you remember from the start of this story, 28-year-old Kayla Crocker was preparing to take her 2-year-old son to her mother's house before going to work, and she had left her car running in the driveway.
She had taken her diaper bag out to the car. She started her car, and it was running, and she was warming it up before she took the baby out to the car. I believe that she saw Boyett and Rice, and I think that they followed her into her home. Her hair had been pulled out in clumps because my mom had said that she couldn't get the image of Kayla's hair around her on the floor.
Kayla's mother found Kayla bound by shoelaces in the nursery of her home, and she had been shot in the head. When help finally arrived, Kayla was rushed to the hospital, but sadly, Kayla's mom was given the heartbreaking news.
That evening, they said they weren't getting no brain activity, and they were going to retest her in 12 to 24 hours to see if there's any changes, and the next day they said there's no changes, and they declared her brain dead.
In addition to being extremely brutal, the murder of Kayla Crocker was also especially disturbing, because when Kayla was shot in the head, her 2-year-old son was in the room.
She was shot in front of the baby. We don't know if the baby was awake or sleeping. That's something we'll never know. We do know that they took her into the nursery and shot her in the nursery.
With the death of Kayla Crocker, Billy Boyett was now wanted for her murder and the murders of 3 other women.
Our Santa Rosa County victims were discovered on January the 31st in the Emerald Sands Inn in Milton, Florida. The 2 deceased were identified as 30-year-old Alicia Ann Greer and 39-year-old Jacqueline Jeanette Moore. Baldwin County victims shot in her driveway on February the 3rd, 52-year-old Peggy Brose. And unfortunately today in Escambia County, we have our first victim, 28-year-old Kayla Crocker. It is difficult to speak about this, ladies and gentlemen, because these are the cases that we in law enforcement fear, where we have what is apparently, with the last 2 victims anyway, a random selection.
Having no previous connection to Peggy Brose or Kayla Crocker, Billy Boyett was now choosing his victims at random. This was not only horrifying because it meant that anyone could be next, but it also meant that Billy's next move was impossible to predict. However, police did eventually learn what Billy had been up to, and it wasn't good. In fact, it was downright terrifying.
Did you advertise an SKS assault rifle in the shop?
Yes.
Did you get a phone call about it?
Yes.
Okay, was one of those phone calls from a female?
Yes.
Okay. And did you end up selling this SKS rifle?
Yes.
Where did you sell it, physically?
In my front yard.
And can you describe the person you sold it to?
A woman, 30-ish, about 5'6", 5'5", something like that.
Around the time of Billy Boyette's murder spree, an Alabama man had placed an advertisement in his local newspaper. He was selling his SKS semi-automatic rifle, a weapon that is capable of firing 45 rounds per minute. Several people called and expressed an interest in buying the rifle, but its owner ultimately settled on selling the weapon to a woman that claimed to be buying it as a birthday gift for her husband. That woman was Billy Boyette's assumed accomplice, Mary Rice. Billy had murdered 4 women, 2 of which didn't even know him. They were completely random victims. And now, Billy had a semi-automatic rifle, and what he intended to do with it was anyone's guess.
Finding the perfect gift for your family members can be a struggle. Our family hasn't been able to get together for quite a while now, so I felt like the pressure was really on. Luckily, I found the perfect way to bring us all together safely. At paintyourlife.com, you get a professional hand-painted portrait created from any photo at a truly affordable price. Choose from a team of world-class artists and work with them until every detail is perfect and receive it in about 3 weeks. At paintyourlife.com, there's no risk. If you don't love the final painting, your money is refunded, guaranteed. And right now, as a limited time offer, get 20% off your painting. That's right, 20% off and free shipping. To get this special offer, text the word podcast to 64,000. That's podcast to 64,000. Text podcast to 64,000. Paint your life. Celebrate the moments that matter most. Terms apply. Available at paintyourlife.com/terms. Again, text podcast to 64,000.
In late January of 2017, 44-year-old Billy Boyette shot and killed his ex-girlfriend Alicia Greer and her friend Jacqueline Moore in a Milton, Florida hotel room. 3 days later, he shot and killed a complete stranger, 52-year-old Peggy Brose in Lillian, Alabama, before stealing her car. And 2 days after that, he shot and killed another stranger, 28-year-old Kayla Crocker in Pensacola, Florida, before also stealing her car. Billy Boyette was on a murder spree, and he was in the company of a 37-year-old woman, Mary Rice, who police believed to be Billy's accomplice. But it was also possible that she was his hostage. Either way, while Mary was with Billy, she purchased a semi-automatic rifle, and there was no telling what she or Billy were planning to do with it. Thankfully, before either of them had a chance to use it, Mary Rice was located.
I was headed up the road and I seen the car sitting in the parking lot of the store. And I circled back around to double check to make sure the tag number matched the description they had out, and it did. When I circled back around, she was pulling out of the store, and I followed the car with her in it all the way to the West Point Motel.
Okay. And did you observe anybody else in the car?
No, I did not.
Okay. Was she in the driver's side or the passenger side?
Driver's seat.
Okay. So she's in the driver's seat, and then you followed the car back to that little motel in West Point?
Yes, sir.
An eyewitness saw Mary Rice driving Kayla Crocker's car to a motel in Troup County, Georgia. And after police were made aware of this sighting, they quickly surrounded the area. Billy eventually confirmed his presence by waving at the police through one of the motel room windows. He had finally been found. Now, the police just needed to capture him, a task that was much easier said than done. Police ordered Billy out of his motel room and told him to surrender, but Billy had no intention of following their commands. Instead, he remained in his room and refused any contact with the police. For several hours, a standoff ensued as Billy ignored repeated commands to surrender. Finally, the police decided they were going to make entry into Billy's room. But just as they were about to do so, his door opened, and Mary Rice stepped out. With her hands raised and police firearms firmly pointed at her, Mary Rice slowly walked towards the police. Then, a gunshot.
Roseanne, it's amazing that this thing has ended after weeks of searching for them, and it all happened here. Mary Rice came out and surrendered, and Billy Boyette allegedly had killed himself.
Billy Boyette's week-long murder spree was over. As for Mary Rice, she was taken into police custody, and needless to say, authorities had a whole lot of questions for her. When police finally sat down with Mary, they began the interview by asking what happened on the night that Billy supposedly kidnapped her.
He came in and he had blood on the side of his head. And he had a gun and he held it at me and he told me to grab some things. And the next thing I know, we're getting into a vehicle, and it was not the red vehicle. It was kind of a bigger vehicle, dark colored.
According to a tearful Mary, on the night she was kidnapped, Billy held her at gunpoint and ordered her into his black SUV. The two of them then drove towards Alabama and spent 2 nights camping in the woods. All the while, Billy allegedly drugged, beat, and raped her. Then on the 3rd day of her captivity, Mary claimed that Billy duct taped her to a tree and left their campsite, only to return a short while later driving a white Chrysler Concorde. This was the car that belonged to Billy's 3rd victim, 52-year-old Peggy Brose.
He goes off with the dark SUV and comes back with a white car?
Yes.
Where did he leave you?
He left me duct taped to a tree. And then he makes me, he has somebody with him. They have a gun on me, they're in the back. I have to follow him in this white car to a parking area.
Mary explained that when Billy returned with Peggy's car, he wasn't alone. A masked gunman was with him, and this masked man allegedly forced Mary into the driver's seat of Peggy's car. Then she claimed the man ordered her to follow Billy's SUV to a nearby parking lot. Once there, Billy unloaded items from his SUV into Peggy's car. Mary and Billy then drove away, leaving the mysterious masked gunman behind. According to Mary, she and Billy lived out of Peggy's car for the next 2 days and drove back to Florida, stopping only to buy food, gas, and ammunition. All the things you need in life.
I guess that's all fine with him until we get flat tire. We walk a little ways, come down this little dirt road. There's a place that sits long ways. Okay. This girl's already car was started. He throws me in it. Okay, he takes the keys, follows her inside.
Just as police suspected, the flat tire forced Billy to ditch the car he had stolen from Peggy Brose, after which he and Mary walked for some time until coming across the home of Kayla Crocker. According to Mary, Billy saw that Kayla had just started a car in her driveway. Billy then threw Mary into the back of Kayla's car and followed Kayla into her home.
Well, the doors aren't opening from the back, and I'm trying to maneuver my way to get to the front to see if I can get out the front. By then, I heard a gunshot go off, and out the car he is. It started it up, and we're gone.
After you hear what you think's a gunshot, then
he's out the door.
He comes running out of the house,
Yeah.
and then is he getting into the car or?
Yeah, he gets in the car. We go, can you get gas?
Did you? Who pumped the gas?
You can make a phone call, and my babies would have been dead.
During this interview, Mary Rice noticeably attempts to speed through any details that make her seem like a willing participant in Billy's rampage, focusing instead on the supposed trauma she had experienced as a victim of kidnapping. But rightfully so, the detectives just we're not buying this crap.
The time with the white car, when he got the white car. What else do you remember about that? Because there's more.
I know somebody got hurt.
Okay. What do you remember about that?
What
did you hear? That's what did you see?
I heard a gunshot.
You heard a gunshot?
Yes.
Okay. Where were you when you heard that?
I was tied to a tree down the road. Someone else was with them. They had a mask, a full mask.
If I were to tell you that numerous people saw you and Billy, you were with Billy because you guys were seeing each other, okay? Hang on.
Until down the road. He put me out down the road.
Hear me out. And then Billy got out of the car. Okay, we're aware of this.
Yeah.
And then is that when you backed the car up to the driveway and that's when you heard the gunshot?
Yeah.
Okay. So Mary, just look at me and let's be honest with each other right now. There was never a third person, was there?
No.
Okay.
For detectives, it didn't require much effort to get Mary to admit that there was no masked gunman involved in Peggy Bro's murder, and Mary was never tied to a tree. Instead, Mary drove Billy's SUV to Peggy's home, where Billy shot Peggy in the head before stealing her car. Then Mary followed Billy to a parking area where the two of them loaded some things from the SUV into Peggy's car and abandoned the SUV. But Mary still maintained that she had no other choice in the matter.
Did you guys see that woman beforehand, or had he come across her that you know of, or was it just like total circumstance?
It was just like bam, bam.
So just kind of like opportunity knocked and Billy took it.
I guess.
And you were along for the ride on that. Now, when he left in the white car and you followed in the black car.
Look at me. I had no choice.
I understand.
Okay, I had no choice. He came and got me from my home in the middle of the night.
Well, let me ask you, Mary, take a deep breath.
After clarifying the events of Peggy Bro's murder, detectives then started asking more questions about Billy's last victim, Kayla Crocker. And once again, Mary's story began to change.
And I want you to concentrate on that time that you guys got the last car. Was that girl was she being mouthy? Was she really talking back to Billy?
Yeah.
What kind of things was she saying?
She's kind of loud.
And she's doing all this inside her house?
Well, she had a porch.
You were right there on that porch area, or did you actually go inside of the house? And Mary,
at one point I actually went inside the house.
Okay.
And grabbed
and I'm glad that you said that, okay, because that eliminated my next question.
Initially, Mary told detectives that when she and Billy came across Kayla Crocker, Billy threw Mary into the back seat of Kayla's car and then went inside Kayla's home. But then, Mary changed her story and admitted that she had also gone inside of Kayla's home. And that's not all.
Kayla wasn't going out without a fight, right? Was she fighting? I mean, you guys.
She was fighting him. She was mouthy with him.
And Billy couldn't really tie her up by himself.
And I was no help.
So you didn't help tie her up at all?
In the back, I tied a little bow, to where she could get out.
Okay.
To where she could get out. Come on now, you know what I mean?
Well, did he ask you to hold her hands for him so he could tie her? Did he ask you to hold her legs to keep her from kicking him?
I have to. He's got two freaking guns, one on me and one on her.
Not only did Mary go inside Kayla's home, she also helped Billy tie Kayla up so that the two of them could ransack her home for food, money, and jewelry. But again, Mary persisted that she had no choice and was only following Billy's lead out of fear that Billy might kill her.
What in the world did Kayla say to make him shoot her?
I know. Yeah, I wasn't in there. I swear to God, I wasn't in there. He made me leave with the bags. He made me leave with the bags. I was not in there. I swear to God, I wasn't in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when Billy comes out, what does he say to you?
He said she was going to call him out. I couldn't trust her.
Okay, and what else did she say?
He didn't say what she said. He didn't. He just said that she upset him.
All right.
28-year-old Kayla Crocker was bound and helpless in the nursery of her home when Billy shot her in the head in front of her 2-year-old. Mary claimed that she didn't witness the shooting, but for detectives, that didn't matter. To them, Mary Rice was clearly an accomplice to murder. The fact that detectives were questioning her as a suspect and not as a victim was not lost on anybody, especially not Mary.
I feel like he's taking my whole life from me and I haven't done anything. He's never beat up.
Mary, we're almost done. Mary. Take a minute. Take a second. You're okay.
I'm not okay. I'm not gonna be okay.
Take a deep breath.
Mary was right. She was not going to be okay. In fact, after this interview ended, Mary was arrested and charged with several serious crimes.
In order to be more efficient, we have decided to charge Mary Rice with not only the homicide in Escambia County involving Ms. Crocker, but also the accessory after the fact from Santa Rosa County based on the evidence we have.
We understand that she used her real ID as Mary Rice to check into this motel. Do you have any reason to believe that she was wanting to be caught?
No, I don't. The evidence that I'm familiar with, based on the investigation that I'm aware of to date, indicates that she did everything she could to keep him from being caught. But I have substantial evidence to establish that she was, in fact, an accessory and really made no effort to have him be caught.
Prosecutors charged Mary Rice with first-degree murder for the death of Kayla Crocker and as an accessory in the murder of Peggy Brose, to which Mary pleaded not guilty to both charges. Not surprisingly, at Mary's trial, her defense team attempted to paint Mary as a battered victim of kidnapping and torture, and argued that that bad man, Billy Boyett, forced her to help him.
The evidence will show that she was basically tortured. And if she didn't do exactly what he wanted to do at exactly the time he said to do something, he would use pain to bring her back in line.
At Mary's trial, there was no dispute about whether or not she was with Billy Boyett during this murder spree. Everything boiled down to just one question. Was Mary Rice a hostage, or was she an accomplice? In an effort to prove the latter, prosecutors called in over 50 witnesses, many of whom were cashiers or convenience store employees that interacted with Mary as she was purchasing food, gas, or camping supplies during Billy's week-long rampage.
Ms. Reinhardt, if Ms. Rice had passed you a note or asked you for help, would you have helped her?
Yes, I would have.
Did she seem scared?
No, ma'am.
Did she seem like she was in distress?
No, ma'am.
Many of these customer service witnesses testified that when they encountered Mary, she seemed perfectly calm. And in some cases, Billy wasn't even with her. Prosecutors also presented the store's surveillance footage that clearly showed Mary casually shopping, as you do, going out to Target on a Saturday afternoon, often alone with ample time to either make a run for it or ask someone to call police. Finally, and perhaps the most damning evidence against Mary Rice, is what she said to a cellmate when Mary was first taken into custody. Clearly not a hardened criminal. Allegedly, Mary confessed to everything she had done while sitting in a cell with a random inmate. Chatty Cathy over here spilled her guts out the first time she gets arrested to a stranger. And authorities only learned about this when that inmate called home. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys that they record your conversations when you call from jail, right? You should know that. You should already know that. Unless you're a complete idiot, you know that.
Because it was just me and her in the cell. And she was like telling me all this stuff. And she was like, I'm going to lie and say that he held me hostage and that he raped me and beat me and forced me to stay there with him. And like, she told me all this fucking shit, dude. Details about these murders.
Oh, wow.
It's like, yeah. And I'm like, bitch, I don't even know you. What the fuck?
Obviously, after hearing this jail call, detectives and prosecutors knew they needed to speak with Mary Rice's cellmate.
So you're housed in the same pod as Mary?
We was in an interview room together by ourselves.
Okay.
For like 24 hours, something like that.
Okay. Just the two of you? Mm-hmm. And while you were in the room together, what did she tell you?
She told me that pretty much it's like they rehearsed what she was supposed to say because he knew he was going to kill himself the whole time. He said that he was not going to jail. She told me that he told her everything that she needed to say to the cops before she left the hotel room. And she said that she told him that it wouldn't work because she didn't have marks on her. So she wanted to say that he raped her and that he abused her. But she told me that they were absolutely in love.
Mary's cellmate basically confirmed what detectives and prosecutors already assumed. Mary Rice willingly went along with Billy Boyett because the two of them were romantically involved. And Mary also supposedly told her cellmate why Billy Boyett killed 52-year-old Peggy Brose.
She told him that she was freezing and she was tired of, being out in the cold or whatever. And he said, well, what do you want me to do, pretty much? And she was like, do anything you have to. And he's like, okay. And so they ran up on the old lady, and I guess he shot her or something. And yeah, she just laughed about it. She was like, well, I was cold, so my baby made sure I wasn't cold.
According to Mary's cellmate, the reason that Billy killed Peggy Brose was because Mary was cold and tired of camping in the woods. She wanted a nice place to stay and a hot shower. But how did Mary feel about killing all those people and stealing their cars? Well, apparently, Mary didn't even give a shit.
Did she ever express any remorse for any of the other victims? The lady, they stole her car, anything like that?
No. They brutally murdered them, and she's just okay with it. And she's like, telling me how in love she was with him. She didn't cry about anything that happened. She cried because he killed himself.
For detectives and prosecutors, it was obvious that Mary Rice was not Billy Boyett's victim or his hostage. She was his accomplice and his lover. But there was one lingering question. What exactly was their long-term plan?
Did she say what their plan was? I mean, I know you said, Billy was planning on killing himself. But were they trying to...
They're going to go to Mexico.
They're going to go to Mexico?
Yeah, they were going to go to Mexico.
All right.
They were going to, I guess, steal cars the whole way there.
Ah, Mexico. Beautiful beaches and all the tacos you can eat. Some ice cold cerveza. And a little mariachi as well. Fortunately, the Mexico getaway plans were canceled when police tracked the two of them to a motel in Troup County, Georgia.
Did she tell you about the final standoff up there in Georgia? How all that went down?
He told her they went over everything she was supposed to say to the cops, and she said that they made love, is exactly what she said. I guess he knew the cops were coming, so he pushed her out of the hotel room and shut the door. And he gave her a big kiss. That's what she said, a big kiss, and told me how much he loved me. And then he made me get out of the hotel room. She said he pushed her out and shut and locked the door. And then she said she heard the gunshot, and that was it.
So she didn't run out on her own. He actually pushed her out.
Yeah, he made her go out. She didn't want to. She said that if he would have let me stay in there, I would have killed myself too.
On January 31st, 2017, Billy Boyett's murder spree began when he killed his ex-girlfriend Alicia Greer and her friend Jacqueline Moore. A week later, on February 7th, after killing two more women, 52-year-old Peggy Brose and 28-year-old Kayla Crocker, Billy took his own life. This left his accomplice, Mary Rice, to fend for herself as she faced the criminal justice system. And nearly 2 years after being taken into custody in late September of 2018, Mary Rice was convicted.
Verdict as to the charge in count 1, we the jury find the defendant Mary Rice guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. As to the charge in count 2, we the jury find the defendant Mary Rice guilty of accessory after the fact to first-degree murder as charged in the indictment.
Mary was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Kayla Crocker and received an additional 30 years as an accessory to the murder of Peggy Brose. Mary's sentences were ordered to run consecutively. So, what are we to make of this woman? Prior to Mary's involvement with Billy Boyett, she had absolutely no criminal record, and by all accounts was a gentle and kind-hearted person. How did she become an accomplice to a serial killer?
I really think that she been looking really hard to fall in love with somebody, and when you're, sometimes you just, you're looking too hard, you're not looking in the right places.
In a twisted way, Mary Rice's story is a tragic love story. Obviously, it's not a modern-day retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but Mary so badly wanted someone to love her, she was desperate. But desperation isn't a characteristic of love. Desperation comes from a place of fear and weakness. And there's a big difference between wanting someone to share your life with and needing someone because you're afraid of ending up alone. Mary Rice was so afraid of being alone and so desperate for any man to love her that she began writing to prison inmates and inviting them into her home. And when Billy Boyett expressed romantic feelings for her, there was nothing he could have done, including murder, that would have made her turn him away. In the end, 4 innocent women were gunned down and murdered in cold blood, and Mary Rice found herself in the very position that she was desperate to avoid. For the rest of her life, Mary Rice will live in a prison cell, and she will live there alone. All right, that does it. Go listen to Sword and Scale Rewind if you want some more. Also, if you haven't already, just do it today. Join Plus. It starts at just $5 a month. You get so much content, so much stuff you will not get on this feed, and you support your favorite show. Swordscale.com/plus. Until next time, stay safe.
Hi, Mike. I am so obsessed with your podcast. So I just wanted to say good job. Keep it moving through all the haters. Y'all got them, and they're going to stay. They never go away, right? Anyway, I just wanted to say good work. You give these victims a voice. You bring up their stories with incredible content to back it up. I think it's phenomenal. And as somebody who worked on a podcast, side story, I worked on the Cold podcast at KSL. I ended up quitting not too long after because I was being sexually harassed by a manager in the workplace who was also promoting the Cold podcast, which is against sexual violence. Susan Powell, I don't know if you want to check that case out. I'm sure you already know it. Anyway, talk about a company that doesn't practice what they preach. Thanks for being real on your podcast and never, ever just trying to make a buck. You're a real one, Mike.